Bulletproof Radio, a state of high performance.
You're listening to Bulletproof Radio with Dave Asprey. Today's cool fact of the day is about the largest muscle in your body. If you don't know what it is, it's actually your gluteus maximus, as they say, baby got back. But what's the smallest muscle? This is one you probably haven't really thought about, so listen carefully. It's called the stapedius muscle, and of course it's in your inner ear, which is why you're listening carefully. It's about 5/100ths of an inch, and it stabilizes the smallest bone in your body, called the stapes or stapes. I have no idea these Latin words. I have no idea how to pronounce it, but it looks like staples without the L. And it also helps protect you from loud noises or even the sound of your own voice. Believe it or not, I believe it's absolutely possible to train that muscle too. It's just hard. There's a couple of technologies that let you do that, but we're not going to talk about ear muscles today because we got some bigger things to deal with. That's kind of a bit foreshadowing who our guest is today. But before we talk about today's amazing guest, who I've wanted to interview for like years, I wanted to talk to you about Fat Water. If you haven't heard about Fat Water, this is the brand new bulletproof beverage. We'll ship it to you with free shipping. And it's a bottled water with zero sugar, sweetened with things like stevia, but it contains brain octane oil. So you get these micro droplets of brain octane that go directly to energy without affecting insulin or blood sugar in any way, shape, or form. It's a really delicious thing. It's something we've worked on for years to be able to get the small amount of fat to stay suspended. It's also got a bunch of B vitamins in it. So the idea is it helps you burn fat instead of sugar. It tastes really good, and when you just don't want to drink another glass of water or another coffee, it's a cool opportunity. There's lemon, pineapple, and grapefruit, and it's awesome. Try it at bulletproof.com. If you haven't heard about the benefits of camel milk, it's totally worth your time to look into this as something you could add to your bulletproof diet. Camel milk is something that I learned about from Walid, the owner of Desert Farms, who's the largest seller of camel milk out there. Camel milk got its start in the autism community because it's non-reactive the way cow milk is, and now it's just become one of the new superfoods that's out there. One of the reasons is that it's full of lactoferrin, which is a natural substance that's present in mother's milk that has antibacterial, antiviral, antiparasitic, anti-cancer properties. And it doesn't have lactose or lactoglobulin, the stuff that makes lactose intolerant people unable to process milk from cows. Desert Farms camel milk is also organic. It's tested for heavy metals and actually 900 different contaminants. It is keto certified, GMO free, has no bovine growth hormone or anything weird like that, and is pasture raised, so it's all grass fed. Desert Farms is offering a really good deal for Bulletproof listeners because they were at the Bulletproof conference and we got to be friends. They're giving away a free bottle of camel milk for you. All you have to do is pay for shipping and handling. Just head over to desertfarms.com/bulletproof to get your free bottle of camel milk right now. That's desertfarms.com/bulletproof. Today's guest, I'm so excited about this, is Charles Poliquin. Charles is a world-renowned strength and conditioning educator and coach. He's helped some of the world's most elite athletes completely kick ass with hundreds of medals, wins, and personal bests in 17 different sports. He's worked with the champions, Olympians, athletes, NHL, NFL, written a few books, one of which you're going to learn about today, and hundreds of articles about his techniques, decades of global training, and he runs Strength Sensei, a valuable online resource around like training, performance for athletes and coaches. And he's also, just on a personal note, he's one of the first biohackers out there. When you look at the world of biohacking, there's the strength and conditioning side, there's the nutrition side, there's the medical side, there's the crazy biofeedback, there's military special ops and resources and all sorts of things. We're doing free divers, Wim Hof kind of polar bear people. And what Charles has been doing for longer than most of those people is looking at the details, the things that happen inside your body, things that happen outside your body, how the signal you send to your muscles changes your body, and come up with things that were absolutely pissing off the world that he said in the 80s that have been proven today to be true. So Charles, it's an honor to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David.
So I'm looking at you now on the YouTube video version of this, and you're about, what, 55 now?
55 exactly, yes.
Can I see your biceps? Like, I just look at that. Like, you guys completely ripped. You've got about 16 years on me. So I'm hoping that I look as good as you, or heck, halfway as good as you when I'm 16, given I probably don't train nearly as much as you do. Why do you focus on maintaining muscle mass as you age like this? Like, what's important about that?
I mean, as early as the 80s in Boston, they did quite a few studies at Tufts where they looked at what could predict aging. And the number one anti-aging parameter that you could like is actually muscle mass. And the number two was strength, right? So it outshined cholesterol, high blood pressure, resting heart rate, max heart rate, and all these other factors. The thing is that there's a phenomenon called sarcopenia, which is death of muscles, and we lose strength. But one phenomenon now more studied by the Italians is actually dynapenia, loss of strength. So there's a lot of exciting research now on actually peptides that would slow down dynapenia and sarcopenia. So one of the ways to stay young is actually how much muscle mass can you retain and how much strength. So for the more you train, the less you age, basically. And then people say, okay, big muscle day. But the thing you have to consider is like when you have a large muscle mass, you also have more insulin inside insulin receptor sites. And then we know that insulin is the hormone of aging. I mean, that's what you're all about. So if you have a lot of muscle mass, your ability to control your glucose, control your insulin is enhanced. And things like in the 80s, people in their late 80s will bring hips, bones, and whatever. But if you have strength, you have more balance. There's actually a very good study done on what was most important in Parkinson's patient. I was consulted on the protocol, but they asked, should they do balance exercise? Should they do aerobic work? Or should they do balance and weight training or balance and aerobic work? And it was one of what I call a no shit Sherlock study, because the results showed that balance and strength training helped. And I told him, I said, aerobic work will worsen the patients. And it did. And I said, you don't need to do the study, but he says, no, we need to. I said, okay, right. So they did the study, and one of the problems with aerobic work is that it oxidizes the body. So if you look at studies on long-term athletes, the ones with the less cognitive ability are actually the ones who've done the most aerobic work in their lifetime. So cross-country skiers, rowers, if you compare their cognitive ability in their 70s compared to a weightlifter or a wrestler or a sport, volleyball, their brains are sharper. Okay, so I mean, I always tell my students we were designed to throw a rock at a rabbit, not chase it. We don't feed ourselves aerobically. So I think people are now. There's been a change in attitude towards strength training, right? And then. And now we know, for example, to prevent osteopenia, which is loss of bone, strength training is very valuable. And the Finns are probably the best researchers on that.
Now, you said a couple of things that I want to dig in on. One of them is definitely around the peptides, and we'll get there.
Yeah.
But the other thing you said was just that aerobic exercise isn't going to be good for your brain.
Yeah.
I've seen some studies that kind of make me mad around telomeres that say if you're doing 50-mile runs, these ultra long distance runners who I believe are kind of beating the crap out of their bodies, they get really long telomeres. Some interesting anti-aging stuff that Bill Andrews has talked about. I am in your camp firmly after many years of doing both cardio and weights. I do occasional very heavy stuff that bends my bones as much as I can. I have machines that bend my bones to cause bone density, and I measure it on DEXA and all that kind of stuff. But what about the studies that say like aerobic exercise does have anti-aging? Can you sort of tell me your perspective on those?
I haven't read those, so I'm not going to comment. But
Okay.
I've seen plenty that show that. For example, we did Sport Canada did research on osteopenia in female Olympians for the 92 Olympics. And what they found is that there was also a direct correlation between mileage of aerobic work and loss of bone. And that's been confirmed by other groups of researchers around the world. So maybe it helps with telomeres, but if you don't have a hip to support yourself on, so what? I think it's, I grew up in the 60s and it was, Cooper and aerobic was great and blah, blah, blah. And then they suddenly pull a 180 on us on that. I think that it's, and if you look at mitochondrial damage or even gut lining damage from aerobic work, the results are not promising. So you got to look at the problem with science is that you have to take one variable, and that's the one you measure, and you can't look at everything. But also in real life, you can't look at the world through a straw. So this may help this, but at the expense of what, right? So I'm not. That's why I prefer studies on long-term athletes, and then say, okay, let's compare a weightlifter to a wrestler. Let's compare whatever. Right? I mean,
I did. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I did a lot of looking at this just for Headstrong, the new book on mitochondria that's really meant for the brain, just through the lens of what's going to grow the most mitochondria. And there's a set of research that says lifting heavy is going to get that for you. And then there's a set of research that says walking for 20 minutes a day is going to get that for you, but not running, not the intense stuff. So the recommendations are like move a little bit every day, which is going to stimulate that. And I use the Bulletproof Vibe, whole body vibration, because it's a little faster than going for a walk. You get stimulation there. But then like lifting heavy, in my case, my goal isn't to be as muscular as you. But to be muscular, or I guess the New York Times called me almost muscular, which is from an anti-aging perspective, I think where I want to be. That was a compliment, I hope. But the goal is that, and that once a week or even once every 10 or 15 days seems to be enough as a non-athlete.
Correct.
Do you think that I might be under-training on strength if I'm maintaining the muscle mass I'm looking for?
The thing is that I would probably increase the volume to maybe twice a week.
Twice a week? Wow.
Yeah, okay. Because but the thing is that are you trying to look like Conan the Barbarian? No, right? Yeah. but the thing I would say is that it would be better to have a short workout twice a week. So let's say 20 minutes twice a week, and 40 minutes once every 10 days. It's like learning.
I only do 15 minutes once every 10 days, but I'm doing it with computer-driven feedback equipment. So I'm basically using the ARX, which I'm fighting against a winch. So it's essentially like isometrics against a moving plane. So you get really rapid muscle exhaustion. I don't think I could do a 40-minute workout on that machine. It would kill me.
Okay, but that's why I would not. But you may want to up your frequency.
Okay, right? I'll play with that. Now. And I'm in my mid-40s. Let's talk about peptides. You said there's some new stuff about peptides. I put on 12 pounds of muscle in the last month with basically 3 workouts, which is unbelievable to me. But I'm using SARMs, the selective androgen receptor modulators. Are those the peptides you're talking about, or something else?
Well, the peptide and the SARM is a different thing. But as far as like say compounds, the SARMs, that's another thing that's very exciting. Like the RAD 140 seems to be very efficient.
I haven't even tried RAD 140. I'm doing 40-33 and 50156. By the way, for everyone listening, there's a blog post on Bulletproof about the different selective androgen receptor modifiers. They're all research chemicals. Some of them are probably banned by sporting bodies, but they seem to work really well. And the reason I did it was because one of them gives you a 50% increase in mitochondria. Like, I'll take that, thanks. Yeah. So anyway, just some people, I don't want to be too technical without defining terms. So go ahead.
But the thing is for example, there's a peptide that's, I just got the paper where they took, it's an animal model, but they on purpose damaged the sciatic nerve and then injected this peptide called corticogen. And there was regeneration of the nerve with that peptide. The interesting thing is that one of the reasons why we lose muscle mass is the damage done to the nerves as we age. So that compound, in my opinion, is the way to go. So last week I had a conversation with Jean-François Tremblay at the University of Montreal. He's going to do a PhD thesis, and he was asking me what protocol do you recommend. And I said, well, I'll go to a retirement community, have people lift weights and inject bathyrostatic water, and have the other ones have the cortigen and see what it does. So that apparently that's what he's going to do for his PhD.
Wow.
And so danapenia is now the word in anti-aging in my field.
Dan Pena?
Like dynamic.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
okay.
The loss of dynamic, so loss of strength.
Oh, so sorry, I heard a glitch there. Dan Pena has been a guest on the show. I'm like, he's like a gazillionaire in the UK. Like what? So sorry, completely lost me. He does anti-aging stuff, but okay. So this idea of loss of strength versus loss of mass. So being bulky and weak is actually probably worse than being less bulky and strong.
Well, one of the things is that you can't separate the nervous system from the muscle. So if you lift weights and get bulky, your nervous system gets a benefit, but probably the ideal combination for anti-aging would actually be something that works at the nerve level and something that works at the muscle level, right? And then, so I'm quite excited about that, and then I think in the next few years we're going to see more and more of papers that will stick danapenia and sarcopenia together.
That is fascinating. When I did this thing with the SARMs, just because this is top of mind for me, I have a computer that's tracking my max, like the max I can lift on just the big four movements, squats and presses and things like that, pull downs. I did at least 12% higher on my max, and on one of them 20% higher, just over the course of 3 weeks by increasing mitochondrial density.
Yeah.
I was completely blown away. Like that really exceeded my expectations. And my max before was reasonable for a guy my size, not insane, but not weak by a long shot. What would a listener today who wanted to reverse their muscle loss, maybe without going to SARMs, or wanted to increase their strength, what is the fastest way that they could go about getting even some kind of gains like that? Like, do they need to go to SARMs, or is this just a training thing?
Okay, I would say training would have more of an impact, but the SARMs in conjunction with training would be 2 + 2 = 5.
Okay.
Okay, so it has a multiplying effect. But I think that if you just did the SARMs and sat on the couch, it wouldn't be a 2, it would be a 0.2, right? So you do need that.
0.2.
Okay, so you do need that stimulus. It's like basically you have a fire, and if you blow air on the fire grows. So the SARM would be the amount of wind that goes on the fire, but you still have to light up the flame. So having wind will not do much for it. So, and then, there's the MK177 that shows promise. So I think this is theoretical, but I've done a lot of stuff theoretically in a practical way that showed up to be true 30 years later. But
that's why I like you.
So if you put a gun to my head and said, man, give me what you think is your best guess, I would say you would do 2 weeks of, let's say, 8 to 12, and change completely the exercise, change completely the speed and the rest interval.
When you say 8 to 12, you mean 8 to 12 reps, stacking the weight up, or
so
for people listening?
8 to 12 reps where you reach muscle failure.
Okay, so a single set of 8 to 12 until you can't do another one. All right.
Or multiple, but the point is that you work at that intensity zone, which would be about 70 to 78% of your max. And then another 2 weeks, I would change the SARM or change the peptide, and then go heavy, like 4 to 6 reps. And then next month, start with another peptide and keep going like that. Because I think with these things is that there's the law of diminishing returns. And then one thing I tell people all the time is that strength training is like learning a foreign language. So you need repetition. So if if I say the word to you in a foreign language once, you're not going to remember it. What research shows is you need to repeat that at least 6 times. But if you do, let's say, a Swedish lesson every 10 days, the odds that you grow your Swedish will be low. So there's such a thing as frequency. But if you're doing Swedish lessons 7 times a day, you just say, my brain can't handle it. So there's a need for rest, there's a need for stimulus. And then the thing is that when you learn a foreign language, how do you know that you mastered the language is when you're funny in it, right? Because, and the thing, for example, the sentence, did he really say it? If I type that on an email, it doesn't say, he really say it? Or did he really say it? Or did he really say it? So just by putting emphasis on one of the words, the sentence doesn't mean the same thing at all, even though it's the same words, right? So with strength training, you have to put emphasis on different things. So that's how you build up your training vocabulary, right? And I think the peptides would be, the strength training would be the vocabulary, and the peptides would be grammar. Right?
Wow, what a great analogy. That's cool, Charles.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so I think that answer for listeners is basically mix up your strength training a couple times a week. And if you did decide to use SARMs, you mentioned several there. I think I covered all, but I haven't talked about cortigen on the blog post about SARMs. Have you written about SARMs? Are they in your new book?
No, but I just hired last night that guy Tremblay from University of Montreal to start writing on peptides and SARMs for me.
Okay, so where can people find that stuff? And just if you like Bulletproof Radio, you've been listening for a while, and you like the people, like Charles is like OG, like really knows more about biohacking and not the. There's definitely a bodybuilding or a muscle mass component to what he does, but there's body composition and performance are actually more behind what he does. Than just the muscle building stuff we're talking about now. So if you're not following him, what's your URL or where should people go to get your newsletter? I read it. Like, it's really good.
Strengthsensei.com.
Strengthsensei.com. All right.
And then, I'm 55 now, so obviously my goals are a lot different than when I was 25. Like Muhammad Ali said, if at 45 you're the same guy that when you were 18, you wasted quite a bit of your life. So I have different goals, but I think that the peptides are very exciting, especially some of the stuff to regenerate collagen, cartilage, like the BPC 157, the BCP 157, the TB 500. I've seen a lot of my students who've, for a reason XYZ, they've torn something, let's say the meniscus, and they go on peptide therapy, and then their lives change because they can finally get out of the pain, right? And I mean, there's one of the things I really like. Unfortunately, they stopped making it in Austria. Was Actovegan, which was basically.
How do you spell that? What is it?
ACTOVEGAN or VIN. It's a veal blood extract. And pretty much everybody that's famous in the world of soccer or track and field has had Actovegan injections. And this stuff will regenerate cartilage. And I can swear by it because my doctor is from Luxembourg, and he prescribed it to me. And on my right shoulder, it completely regenerated the cartilage. But now only Lithuania makes it, so it's a bit harder to get. But if you're creative, you could get it.
That's interesting. I'll have to do some research on that. By the way, for you, if you're listening and you didn't catch that, all of these compounds will be in the show notes on the Bulletproof website. And there's a full transcript you can read as well. So if you want to go back and take notes on this.
I will send you a picture of the product. I can send that to you.
Oh, cool. That's really helpful. I'll have to find a way to get some and give it a shot myself. Now, I think that there's probably some discomfort from people listening. We're talking about using some research-grade chemicals, things that have been proven in labs, but we don't have 25 years of data to show that they're not going to make you grow new eyeballs or cancer cells or whatever else. But you have athletes using them. You've obviously used some of these things yourself. I've used them because I looked at the risk-reward, and the reward is pretty big, and the risk looks pretty low, given the mechanisms we know. How how concerned about safety are you for all
Well,
these things?
I want to make a note here. None of my athletes have used them because they possibly could be banned any day, right? So, but I have students, lots of students, or non-athletes that have used them.
I hear you.
So I get a lot of feedback from the trenches on how great they are. But personally, I have used peptides and the active vegan to generate soft tissue, and I think they work really well. I have no qualms about that. The thing, yes, there's not a lot of research yet, but it's one of these things, how much risk are you trying to take from, put it this way, I'd rather be pain-free than not being paid. That without using like oxycodone or anything like that. And at least you generate the joint. But Actovegan, I first heard about it around 2004. And I can tell you, pretty much, there's a country, I will only use its initials, Germany, that where a lot of the soccer players have been treated by this doctor out of Munich with Actovegan. It's not a banned substance. They wanted to ban it. I've heard it in some federations banned, but it's a miracle compound. I mean, I've seen a lot of retired athletes fly to Munich, get treated with that. Golfers are done there. But the compound is time tested. I've never heard of anybody for the last 15 years having any issues with it.
If a 50-year-old CEO who's got an extra 20 pounds of gut, flies all the time, and exercises a couple times a week if he's lucky, and is looking at, all right, I don't like the flab, I don't like my muscle mass. Is it appropriate for guys like that to start thinking about incorporating peptides, or should they just go straight on testosterone replacement? Because if you're 50, your testosterone is low anyway.
First thing you should do is get a full panel. Right? Yeah. Because a lot of times guys have low testosterone because they don't manage their insulin properly. And,
let's go to that, yeah.
Okay, and the second most important factor, and some people think it is the most important factor, and we tend to agree, is sleep quality. Okay? Mm-hmm. If you look at, there's a lot of research on what does boost testosterone, but one thing that we know that works in 100% of subjects is deep sleep. Okay? But people look at screens. I tell people, you want good sleep, stop looking at the screen 3 hours before you go to bed. Right? So there's that. Its effect on the pituitary gland and whatever else. Magnesium deficiency will disrupt your sleep. So I would say to your listeners, there's 7 cheap tests you can do, even if you don't have insurance and you pay out of your pocket. You can go to a place like any test, any Yahoo, or whatever that brand is, and write your own script. The thing that's most important, in my opinion, is HB1AC. So glycosylated hemoglobin. So if you say you only have $40 to invest in your health, check that out. And of course, the lower the percentage of that molecule, the healthier you are. But if you're 6.8, you're diabetic after your next soda. That's where you're on the edge. I mean, soda, like Joe Polish says, is liquid Satan, right? So you get your HbA1c and you try to bring it down at least below 4.8. So that's a test. Vitamin D3 is linked to all causes of mortality. If your D3 is horrendous, you're more prone to depression. You're more prone to suicide. But also glucose and insulin management is horrendous. So you get your D3 status. Then I would measure my morning insulin, my morning glucose. So if you just look at math, in the US, they tell you your morning glucose should be between 70 and 99. Well, that's a stupid way to look at it, because for every milligram percent you're above 70, your risk of heart attack goes up 5%.
Above 70, not 87, which is the gold standard for anti-aging forever?
Kidding me? So
70 is damned low, Charles. Wow.
So if you're 99, right? You got 145% more risk of a
But your
cardiac.
risk is so low. I mean, your risk is really low anyway on average. So 145% more like relative risk is kind of it's a small change, right? You got to.
Yeah, but the problem is the doctor will say you're fine.
That's a fair point. I get that.
So
Okay.
what would you rather have, 70 or 99, right? So, I mean, not taking care of your health is a very sure sign of low self-esteem.
Yeah.
Right? So I would look at that. And then another test I would do is a reactive insulin test. Because sometimes you pass morning glucose, morning insulin, but you don't pass glucose challenge test, right? And then, so we have glucose, insulin, reactive glucose, HbA1c, vitamin D3, and the last two are red blood cell magnesium. I didn't say serum magnesium, red blood cell magnesium, and then red blood cell zinc. Because if you look at it, a magnesium deficiency impacts 4 major systems. You can't make DHEA properly if you don't have enough magnesium. Magnesium regulates how much cortisol you put out under stress. So people with high red blood cell magnesium are low stress responders. In the sense that if you give 2 people the same amount of stress, somebody with a lot of magnesium reserve will handle it, and the person with poor magnesium will freak out. Okay? In French, we say une tempête dans un verre d'eau, a thunderstorm in a glass of water. They're the types of people that overreact to everything. That's a clinical sign of low magnesium. And zinc is known as the great organizer. So anything that has a fluid is regulated by zinc. Whether it's your tears or your semen, it's zinc related. So if you have poor zinc status, you also have poor immune status. And both magnesium and zinc are involved in insulin and glucose management. So that's why I love those 7 tests. You do what I call them manifesting 7, and it's a cheap way to get it. And if you have more money, then you can look at your telomeres and whatever else. But for the listeners out there, and it's interesting because some of your listeners may be from Sweden, and to get a D3 test in Sweden, you got to fill a 3-page questionnaire. Right? So when I have Swedish friends that go over to stay at my house, they go to any test I've done anyhow, and they get a full panel for about $600. That would cost thousands in Sweden, and you would have to go through days of paperwork. Right? So
my wife.
Go ahead.
My wife is a Karolinska trained Swedish physician who practiced. Well, she's not formally practicing. She has a fertility coaching practice now. But yes, sometimes it's weird because Sweden is very progressive on some medical things. But like vitamin D in a dark country, you'd think they'd want to like hand that out at the 7-Elevens, but it doesn't make sense.
Precisely.
So I love it that I said, what should a 50-year-old do in order to, put muscle back on? And instead of saying, use SARMs, use peptides, use testosterone, you're like, get the core data about what's working and what's not working. So given, you got a guy who probably doesn't sleep very well, or a woman, doesn't sleep very well, probably doesn't train very effectively, lots of job stress and circadian stress because they're flying around and things like that. So what of those lab tests would you predict would be off in the average person who's carrying 20 extra pounds and not quite happy with how they look?
All 7.
All 7, okay.
That's why with years of experience, I found that those 7s are the cheapest way to do it, because I always have questions from my readers like, I can't afford this test, I can't, and I say, okay, this is the cheap bastard way to find out how healthy you are, right? So if a guy came to see me and all those values are out, I don't think there's a point to go on testosterone until you fix your insulin, right? Because the guy goes, okay, I need testosterone, so he goes to see a doctor that is willfully prescribing testosterone, gives him testosterone, but he's fat. So some of that testosterone will aromatize, and then you'll have nipples the size of frisbees within a week, right? And he's going to squat to piss because his estrogen's way through the roof, right? So the first thing you need to do to improve health is to improve insulin sensitivity. So lose your 20 pounds. If you have the testosterone count of a Catholic mouse in a church, and go on testosterone. But the thing is that insulin is a castration and aging hormone. Okay, so learn how to eat, learn how to sleep, and there's so much data.
How do you recommend eating? I mean, I know the answer, but I think listeners would also just appreciate your take on it. So, what should your plate look like?
My diet looks like, okay, I'm a big believer. Well, okay, rule number one, the diet has to suit your genetics.
Yep.
So how I eat is different than how someone should eat. So, for example, there's a lot of studies on the amount of copies of the amylase digestion genes. So if you're from
starch.
For starch. So if you're from Kashmir, you can eat a lot of starch and stay lean. Okay. With my ethnic background, that does not work for me. If you're from
and what's your background?
I'm French Canadian, but I have quite a bit of native blood. So for me, meat is great. So let's say if I wake up in the morning, this morning, what did I have? I had yak. Right? I love yak. So
I love yak.
So what I do is I put goat butter. I roast some cashews, and then I throw in the meat, put some salt, some spices, eat that. And then I always believe that in the morning, for a guy like me, so that's what I do, but it may not work for you if you're from Vietnam, right? So the amount of the average percentage of carbohydrates worldwide is 40%. That's optimal if we look just at an average. But for a person like me, 25 is a lot. So, and I'd rather stick
25%, not 25 grams, right? You're not like ultra low carb or anything.
Okay. And because I got a lot of muscle mass, I can afford more carbs. So the rule with carbohydrates is carbs have to be deserved. So if you're fat, you don't deserve carbohydrates. Maybe if you have 30% body fat, your carb intake should be 10 licks of a dried prune at Christmas. Okay, that's it.
So you would recommend radical carbohydrate restriction for fat people?
Correct.
Okay.
But up to a point, if you're from Serbia or Slovenia, you tend to have very low fat in the upper back, even when you're fat. And those people do terrible on low carb diets for fat loss. But it's the quality of the carbohydrate you should have. It's slow carbohydrate versus Twinkies, right? I mean, that's common sense. And Mark Twain said once that the problem with common sense, it's not that common, right? Or if you do have common sense, the curse is the amount of people you have to deal with every day. So that's what I would eat. And then as a source of fat, I use MCT oil, I use fish oil, and I use 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. And like that, my brain's on fire, not inflamed, but I can write, I can coach, and that works for me.
Are you looking for ketones from your diet? No, you're eating too many carbs to get ketones. So what's the MCT oil for? Is that to raise ketones?
To raise ketones, but also to make my insulin curve be as low as possible. Right? And for lunch, I typically go for a white protein. So fish, chicken, turkey. There's nothing magical about white, but I dealt a lot with the hockey players, so I like things that are simple. So red in the morning, white, so people don't have to worry. Right? So, and then that's what I would have, 2 or 3 vegetables, or salad. And then my dinner usually is another protein. Let's say I could have duck breasts, but I really like to have more fats. I'm not a guy that does very well on lean meats. Yak is a very lean meat, but because I use goat butter and all the other oils, it takes care of that. One thing with meat... Do you
use goat butter?
Every day.
Is the goat butter because you're allergic to cow butter or because it has higher butyric acid in it?
That's the reason, but also you get taste fatigue. Sometimes I use cow's butter, but I find that for me, probably because of the butyric acid, I feel better on goat butter. And it's funny because everybody that comes here, right now we're filming videos for my upcoming membership site, and I had a guest, and it's the first time he ate yak with goat butter, and he's like, now he's a convert, right? So I use quite a bit of that. And then at dinner, that's when I would have starch for the day. So typically sweet potatoes or purple potatoes, or some type of starch, some rice. But most people should stay away from grains. And one thing that I found that's really useful is for people to get um, food intolerance tests. But there's only one lab that does a correct food intolerance test.
Which is the one which is the lab you recommend? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You know what? I've tried every lab using players' insurance from different federations because they can afford whatever they want. The federation doesn't care. The only one that is valid is Cyrex Labs.
You like Cyrex? Okay, that's one I've been recommending for a long time.
I love Cyrex because the thing with Cyrex, they can tell you if your gut is compromised, which is the first series of tests you do. They also look at what does the food do to your blood-brain barrier. So, and I just had a class in Phoenix with Cyrex, and then we had every student did the test, and every day I got an email like, man, that test changed my life. Because, for example, I had a student from the Czech Republic, and she ate daily oats and dairy, right? And this girl was very lean, but there was no visible sign of an abdominal on her. And then a week after abstaining from all the red foods, she had deeply etched abs because of the inflammation created by the forbidden foods. So with Cyrex, what I've seen is that, for example, depression. A few years ago, I had periods of severe depression. Depression where I was a loser, I wanted to shoot myself in the face, like I was disclosed. And it would only happen one day a month, every month. I said, you know, I can't have PMS, you know. I don't have a uterus or ovaries, so what was wrong? So I did the Cyrex lab, and it turns out I was the patient at that time with the worst wheat allergy they've ever seen. High score.
Wow.
And why would I have depression? And I was also intolerant to cow products. And then, so I would fly home to see my daughter, and I'm not the type of guy to carry his food in Tupperware to stink up the first class, so I would eat whatever there was. And I'd say, I'm having one bun a month with one slice of cheese. So what? Well, it wasn't even so what. So within 12 to 16 hours, I would have these stupid thoughts. So Mondays, I would feel like shit, man. By Tuesday, I was fine. And so I did a Cyrex test, abstained from all the foods. And then 6 months later, I retested. And the wheat was still severely there. But I was not intolerant to eggs and dairy anymore. So, because you get what you call cross reactivity, right? So the Cyrex saved my brain, that's for sure. That's why when people say I can't lose weight or there's something wrong, I don't know what it is, usually it's a food intolerance.
Yeah. My experience has been the same way, both personally. I would have my one cheat day on, like a Friday night. I'd have a cheesecake or something, and I'd be okay on Saturday, a little tired on Sunday, and Monday I was just a total jerk and a zombie. And it took me like a couple of years, and this is going back like 15 plus years, to figure out that it's what you did a few days before. And it was personality changes, like I'm angry, like my middle finger on Monday morning is like really ready to go. And it's, you kind of feel like you're a little bit crazy or something, because like, why is this going on? It's environmental. It's what you put in your body, right? Yeah,
the two worst sources of stresses is what come from the mouth, what you put in your mouth and what comes out of your mouth, right? So,
well said.
So,
and if you put the wrong stuff in, you're going to not like what comes out. That's for sure.
Yeah, and then it's funny because I have one of my Russian clients got her test done, and she goes like, "It's amazing how our brain has changed from just eliminating those foods." And it's interesting because some of the foods are thought as being healthy. For example, I've got a strong intolerance to quinoa. I would rarely eat quinoa, but every time I eat quinoa, I thought I ingested napalm. Like I said, why is my stomach killing me? And flax, I'm very intolerant to flax. So by dropping those foods, I mean, my health, and then joint pain went away. Right? Food intolerance is killer for your joints.
And I'm grateful that you're just going into those details. So one group of people would say, well, this guy obviously is weak because he can't eat everything on the planet. And if people are watching the video, dude, you're not weak. Like you kick ass on multiple levels. Your brain is sharp. You're in really good physical shape. And what's going on is you found the stuff that's biologically compatible with your system, and you avoid the stuff that makes you weak, right?
Correct. So, but the thing is that one of my friends is Serbian, and he's done the test. He's very lean, and if I ate what he ate every day, I'd be on welfare and depressed and unmotivated, right? And if he ate what I ate, he'd be sluggish, right? So the key is with nutrition is to find what works for you. But it's a very simple test. You can find it on my website. It's the breakfast test. Is I have people wake up, right on the scale 1 to 10, how their brain works, right? So they could say, okay, I feel like a 7. And then they do the meat and nuts breakfast, which is explained also on my site. And then an hour later, you should rate their brain. And most people will have an increase in their scores. I feel better. And some people say, actually, I feel sluggish. Then the next day, I make them do the opposite. So 70 to 80% carbohydrate breakfast. And then rate yourself before the breakfast and after the breakfast. A guy like me, if I had pancakes for breakfast, I'd be waiting for my welfare checks. I would never work in my life. But some people thrive. So, for example, my daughter's mother could probably go to work drinking a liter of maple syrup before going to work, and it wouldn't bother her, right? But she has a high tolerance to carbohydrates. So, to sum it up, is you got to eat according to your genes, not your Levi's, but your genetic profile.
So, one of the things that I did in putting together the infographic or the roadmap for the Bulletproof diet was I'm like, look, there's a group of things that agree with most people, like the non-offensive vegetables that most people aren't allergic to. Most people can handle butter, even if they're dairy sensitive, they can eat butter, and a few other like kind of simple foods that are high in nutrients. I'm like, just eat that for a while. You don't have to be low carb. You can eat some rice, but just the clean sources of starch that don't go up a lot. Do it for 2 weeks and see how you feel. And most people, to your point, like they're like, "Wow, I feel great." And there's this huge list of suspect foods: lentils, nightshades, all sorts of other things in their grains. Where you know what, huge percentage of the population aren't going to do well. And unless you're going to go out and do a Cyrex panel, you're probably just not going to know. So the idea is eliminate all the potential suspects just to get a baseline. And for me, like the big difference was, wow, all this pain I've had my whole life. I've had 3 knee surgeries. It all went away, which was remarkable. And then you can add stuff back in. And of course, I have my lab tests and all that from different food tolerance labs, just like you. But most of them didn't pick out. For me, the nightshades are a big thing. So the whole point for listeners is, it's okay if the guy next to you is eating something and you like that food and you just choose not to eat it because it's not compatible with your system. There's no weakness, and anyone who tries to shame you or tell you, oh, you have to eat that, like, just tell them to go screw themselves. Like, don't eat stuff that makes you feel crappy and act like a jerk. Like, that's what's happening to us.
Yeah, because, if I could invent a pill that makes Krispy Kreme tolerable to everybody, I'd be a billionaire, right? So the thing is that one thing that people do notice when they start eating clean is that the so-called cheat foods start to have no value. Right? They go like, now I know why I stopped. Right? I remember in 2006 I had to go back to Canada for 9 months, and I had to drive a long time, and I stopped. And it was one of those gas stations with no healthy food. I thought, fuck this, I'm going to have. And I picked a chocolate bar that I used to like as a kid. After the first bite, I go, holy shit, I know why I stopped. I threw it in the garbage. But the thing is that as your cells get smarter, you can tell what works for you or not. And then, for example, most people. No, I don't know anybody that's ever been mugged by a dozen donuts, right? So they're all voluntary choices. It's one of these things we do have control. We don't have control over the elections, but we do have control about the food we put in our stomachs. So, and then what I tell people is that what is your body and your brain worth to you? And if you pick those M&Ms instead of picking up raisins and cashews, you're telling me you have low self-esteem. The most read article on my website, it's called The Myth of Discipline. And I blow away the myth of discipline because I don't think there's such a thing as discipline. It's whether you love yourself or not. So if you love yourself, you make the right choices. If you have low self-esteem, so if you say to me, I really like to eat 2 dozen donuts a day, and I'm a recovering Catholic, I'm not going to put guilt or shame on you. I'm going to tell you, you prefer your taste buds than having a well-functioning brain. That's your choice, but it's not a matter of discipline. You know?
You and I are both focused on this cognitive function, and you said something that's controversial, but something that Dr. Perlmutter and Dr. Amen, two very well-known neurologist types who are friends and guests on the show, they said the same thing, but I think you might have been the first one to say it, that the link between IQ and fast food consumption. What's your take on that?
Oh, okay. Well, there's a very good researcher out of Calgary, Richard Johnston, who all he did was he measured the amount of Kentucky Fried Chicken outlets there was per capita. So it would be an indirect way to measure trans fats consumption. And there's an inverse correlation between the amount of KFCs and your IQ.
Oh, no.
Right.
It's trans fats and MSG, they both are going to jack your brain in every way.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you ate your grain and cheese thing once a month and made you feel bad. I know people who are like, well, I'm not drinking, so I had insert name of junk food place here. How often is okay? Is it okay to have fast food like that?
Okay. I think, you got to look by, let's say if you have 4 meals a day and you have 28 meals a week and one is cheat, I don't think it's going to be that bad because you have 27 that are good, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not 100% commitment. So if you want 100% results, it's 100% commitment.
Yeah.
But I don't think that meal is going to destroy the other 27, right?
No, it's not.
So, and I think one thing that I find successful as a clinician is to allow people to have I prefer to call it a refuel meal than a cheat meal, or a permissive meal than a cheat, because cheat, implies Catholic guilt. So I don't like that. So, and then I tell people, what I do is that on purpose, I tell them, eat the worst shit you can think of that you really like. And people say, like, what do you mean? I said, if you want to park a tent at Mrs. Fields and eat cookies for 24 hours, eat cookies for 24 hours. And then what I make them do is I make them train the next day, and their muscles are full of glycogen, they feel good, they retain water, they put weight on the scale, but as soon as they do certain movements, they go, oh shit, I got so much elbow pain, or I got knee pain, or I'm so stiff, and I go, dude, that's the food you ate yesterday. So next week when we do the permissive meal, let's try, say, sticky mango rice instead of donuts, right? And then, but I think people learn better from experience than from verbiage and even charts. So when they feel it, then it's a much easier pressure point to hit. Right?
Well said. I recommend after the 2-week bulletproof diet thing, we avoid all these things. Have pizza, beer, and ice cream, and just wake up the next day and see what you're made of. And I think that's why for the average listener, I don't recommend eating garbage once a week, because the recovery time is too high for you. It takes a lot of willpower and effort. But if once a week you do higher carbs, you might even, God forbid, have a little sugar that day, but not like deep fried sugar bombs, with glyphosate frosting. The difference in how you live your life is measurable. Like I think that the angle of your ascent will be measurably better.
But I think, a good kick in the balls or a punch in the face teaches you better than a slap. Yeah. So I tell people,
it does.
So if you have a kick in the ball, meals of pizza, ice cream, and beer, the next day you'll feel like shit. And the next weekend, if we say, okay, let's try other sources of carbs that will not bring inflammation, then they realize nobody hit them on Saturday night, and they feel good. And then they can say, okay. But I find that when you go too low on carbohydrates for too long, your glycogen stores go down too much. So I like to give people a refuel day. What's the frequency of refuel day? It depends on how much muscle mass you have, and also sociological factors. So, for example, when I used to train a lot of NHL players, they would have a permissive day every fifth day. And two of my players says, is it okay if I have it Saturday night? And I said, like, why Saturday night? Because my family, I got to spend quality time with them. This is the off season, and can I have cheesecake and wine that day? So they were actually doing it less frequently. I said, go ahead. And it worked for those guys. They would rather have a permissive meal every 7 days and do it with their family than every 5 days alone, sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to look at those factors. The key is progression, not perfection. And
well said.
Yeah, so it's it's one step at a time. But the thing is that a really good book that I'll recommend to your readership is actually from Gretchen Rubin, Better Than Before. She actually, it's probably something you should have on your podcast.
Absolutely.
I've listened to her and I bought her books, and it explains a lot of things that I kind of figured out over the years, but I did not have a name for it. But she did have a name for it. Some people are upholders and they'll do everything you do, and they're all so strict on some people, and there's people that will comply all the time. They don't do anything for themselves, and there's questioners and there's rebels or whatever. But for example, some people here could listen to you and I's advice on managing insulin, and because they're rebels, say, fuck these guys, I'm going to eat as much insulin producing it. So those guys are hard to convert. They will only convert if they convince themselves. So my approach is like, are you better than yesterday? That's what matters.
Very important approach. In fact, I think if people walked away from this interview with just one thing, that might be the most important thing. Now, Charles, we're up on the end of the interview, which kind of makes me sad because I wish that we'd booked like 4 hours to chat, because I think listeners would benefit from that. Maybe I can invite you on again.
I would love to.
By the way, if you're listening and you want that to happen when we post this on Facebook and on iTunes, just give us a lot of likes and share this with some friends, and I'll definitely maybe we can do it in person too. It's always more fun to do that. But there's a question I want to ask you. I think you might have some really good insight here, and I've asked every guest out of more than 350 guests on Bulletproof Radio. And it's, if someone came to you tomorrow and said, look, I want to kick more ass at everything, not just in the gym, not just on the field, but just want to kick ass at life. What are the 3 most important pieces of advice you have for me from anything you've ever lived? The most important things.
Number 1, what you appreciate appreciates. So you have to be grateful. We live in a country.
Gratitude, love it.
Okay, so the clothes you wore today, you chose them, right? So we live in a country where we can pick the clothes we want, for a large percentage of it. But I think that if every day you have a grateful log and you make a list, but it's not like I'm grateful for my dog. And try to come up with 3 different things, and you could lower the bar on gratitude. So let's say if you're traveling and I'm in a Radisson hotel and the bed sheets are better than staying, let's say, at the Hilton, so I'm grateful I'm sleeping in a great bed. I could do something as menial with that, but it's when you start to appreciate the little things that things change. And when you appreciate things, things change for you, right? So, for example, you get a big check, you should write, I really like that big check I just got today, and you'll have more big checks. I appreciate the progress I made in the gym today, you'll make more progress. So what you appreciate appreciates. Number 2, I would say, if I were to relive my life, and I'm giving this advice on my deathbed, sleep better. I think sleep is the most underrated health factor in people's lives.
That's the 3rd time you said sleep better, not sleep more. And that's
Correct.
Another thing that's really interesting about you, because I am so in that camp with you. All right, on the next episode with you, there won't be the next one, but next time I interview you, I want to go deep with you on sleep, because that's one of the areas where I've spent a lot of time writing, and I know you know some stuff there we didn't get into. So we're going to save that for number 2.
Okay.
All right, and what's your third answer to that big question?
Stay away from grains. Doesn't matter what genetics you are, right? Because
yes,
yeah, because if you if, let's say, you make me emperor of all galaxies tomorrow, right? I can't force people to not have to have a grateful dog or to go to bed early or whatever, but I would ban grains. There's one problem with that. 58% of the world population would die within a week because that's the biggest caloric intake. But let's say ban grains in the top GNP countries of the world would have a huge impact because grains rob you of minerals, they create inflammation. Some genotypes do better, but if we went grainless as a start, also the brains would work better. I have a few private Facebook pages, and I see questions, and I'm going like, that guy must have had pancakes for breakfast. It's because there's a good study from Harvard. All you're eating pancakes for breakfast lowers your IQ 20%. So, temporarily. But the thing is that in a society that's so carb addicted, we can't get people's mind to function properly. If everybody was just 20% more efficient with their brain, our whole society would change.
That is my experience, and we're certainly in alignment there. Now, you have a book that you're going to release for just I think a couple weeks for people listening to the show today.
Yeah.
Similar to what you did with Tim Ferriss when you were on his show. Tell listeners the kind of stuff you put in this book and what they have to do to get it.
Okay, so what the Tim Ferriss listeners, what am I buying away with that book? It's done very well. What they learn in the book is muscle loss. Like, these are things I really like to live principle based. So I say, like, how often should you train? So I give all the why first, and then I give you the how. So if you don't give a crap about the why, you can do the how. So there's detailed training plans, and I created a private Facebook page for it. So when you buy the book, we invite you to the private page, and there you can ask your question. And one of the big features, people say, "Wow, I read the book, and now the Strength Sensei himself is answering my questions." And with the book, we give you how to eat, we tell you how to prepare your brain for the workouts, and so on. And I basically have a consumer's guides to supplements because there's millions of supplements out there, and there's a lot of fraud. Right? So
it's a huge problem.
Huge problem. So I tell you this, and then I think that every single reader said the biggest advantage for this $47 they invested is how much return they had on it. So that's great positive feedback. I listened to Schwarzenegger in a private VIP seminar in Melbourne, and he said you have to break the mirror and look who's behind the mirror if you want to make a change in society. So it's the first time I've written a book on a detailed book on how to build muscle mass. I've written a lot of books on strength training, but this one would be more for your listening audience because they're trying to fight aging, but the information is still applicable, or highly applicable, in fact. And then I think your listeners will benefit quite a bit from it.
Beautiful. So we'll hook all of you up with that. And Charles and I are definitely in the same in the same vein. There are definitely some differences. I encourage you as budding biohackers to take a look at what works for you, which is most important. And I find Bulletproof coffee is a uniting element that people have in the morning that works for the vast majority of people, but it may not work for you. And you may just want the brain octane oil. You may not want the butter. It just may not work for you. And it's okay. It doesn't mean something's wrong with you. You may lose weight quickly, you may lose weight slowly, or heck, you might be one of the very rare people who gains weight from doing that, in which case you change it. By the way, I forgot, I was going to mention earlier in the show, Charles, with MCTs versus brain octane at the American Academy of Antiaging Medicine a couple weeks ago. I presented a new study looking at ketone formation from coconut oil, which raises ketones the same as fasting for 8 hours, like very modest rise. MCT oil, just the generic source with the mixed types of oil, raised ketones about twice coconut oil, but the brain octane oil was between 4 and 5 times higher.
Wow.
So you can get to that 0.5, and that's why I do that brain octane versus MCT, even though it's in the category of MCTs, it's a subcategory, but you're getting a lot more ketones before you hit the bowel tolerance disaster pants level. So I'm just bringing that up because I know a lot of people listening are like, well, if I go read Charles's stuff and he tells me to drink lemon juice in the morning, which by the way I like in the morning, but I don't always talk about it. And whatever other tweaks, it's all good. Like, you're allowed to go out and do what works for you. And I got to say, Charles has an incredible reputation and an incredible body of experience, especially working with athletes. He's focused at least as much as I am on aging because he's got 10 more years on me and has looked at some of these things, and I'm really getting into that. Next time, Charles, we're going to talk about stem cells.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of work with my own stem cells, including I had them injected 4 days ago into my brain for the second time. We're going to talk about sleep quality for sure, and we're going to talk about stretch marks.
Yeah.
I know you know a few hacks there. I just came out with a book about stretch marks that's on Amazon. So those are 3 topics. So I don't know how soon you'll be back on. It'll probably be another few weeks or something. But I'm really looking forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Really welcome. I'm very pleased. First of all, I thank you for being on, but I'll try it out at brain octane field. You're stimulating my brain on that one. I'm always looking for
I'll send you some.
The latest biohack, but I appreciate being on the show and looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
So thanks for being on the show. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.